This is Continuum Drag, a weekly podcast where we watch sci-fi, fantasy, and everything in between.
This week, seaQuest 2032, Season 3, Episodes 10 and 13.
October 28th, 62. Both leaders, President Kennedy and Nikita Khrushchev, they negotiated a way out of the crisis. Instigated a process of peacemaking that lasted till the end of the Cold War, 30 years later.
None of this timeline, Captain. This isn't static. We're hearing it's fallout radiation from a massive nuclear attack. They've destroyed the planet.
Welcome to Continuum Drag, the podcast that knows time isn't a circle, it's a straight line. I'm Luke, here with my co-host Jordan. What's real, Jordan?
What's real? We'll always have the internets.
We'll always have the internets. That's never been truer than right now for us.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, we've done it, Jordan. We've done our speed run of seaQuest, and we've arrived at our last two episodes of Season 3.
How do you feel? Do you feel like you're a better person?
I don't know how I feel. I don't know how I feel about seaQuest. I don't know how I feel about anything anymore. seaQuest has broken me.
I like the third season of seaQuest. I really do think it took a while, and unfortunately, by the time they figured out what the kind of show they were making and what the sort of stories they wanted to tell and in what tone, they were too far gone. I think they were just a show that no one wanted. I think the brand was tarnished, and I think they were already going to be dead in the water. And they're like, no, we got it. And it's like, too late. You're canceled.
Well, I've got all that information for you right here, Jordan, because I found an article from a website called The Companion that went into an interview with two of the writers from Season 3, Javier Grillo, I'm going to mispronounce his last name, Grillo Marxach, and Naren Shankar? Is that how you say it? You knew how to say it the other day.
Naren
Shankar.
Yeah.
So they did an interview with them to kind of discuss Season 3 and the oddities of it. So I got some factoids about it for you.
Sure.
Well, we've already obviously discussed the turmoil of Season 1 with creator Rockne O'Bannon then passing on the baton to showrunner Tommy Thompson, who's then later tossed off. And things obviously got worse in Season 2, but I kind of know why now. Is apparently in Season 2 there was dual showrunners, Patrick Hasberg and David Burke. And Hasberg stayed in LA when the production moved to Florida, but Burke went to Florida with a team of writers as well. And apparently the feud started between the two of them, and they stopped talking to each other.
Well, that's always a good sign for a TV show.
Yeah, and as a result, a lot of episodes were being written without consultation, to the point that an example I saw was that in Season 2, with a gap of one episode between them, there are two different demon possession episodes that when it became obvious they had both written separate demon possession episodes, neither would back down.
Well, I mean, honestly, I know you liked it. Season 2, I think, we only watched a little bit of it. It was terrible. It was a terrible show. I'm surprised it made it to Season 3.
I would love to see this dueling demon possessions.
You know what we should have done? You should have watched one of them. I should have watched the other, and we just talked about it and see if we could have actually got through the podcast.
As if they're the same episode.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Jordan, you're right. Season 2 is such a disaster. As we know, Roy Schneider wanted out, and creatively, critically, ratings-wise, disaster. So you're right. NBC actually had planned to cancel it, and it was on its way out. They even had their replacement series lined up and ready to go for seaQuest before Season 3. So Season 2 was the end of seaQuest.
Right.
And that replacement show was called Rolling Thunder, Jordan, a series about spies fighting crime in monster trucks.
I do not remember that show, and I'm going to guess why.
NBC realized at the last second this was a worse show than seaQuest, and at the last minute gave seaQuest a green light for a third season.
Well, if you think about it, you have a show that's not doing well, but they were like, oh, well, maybe we've got the sets, we've got the uniform, we've got most of the cast. Maybe it's just another retool one more time, some more bandages on it,
Well, I mean, I guess if your other option was spies and monster trucks, you're like, oh, wait, this is as bad a mistake.
I like that it got that far. It was almost to production.
I just like they're so desperate to replace it. The worst idea they could find in the pile was the other option.
Well, I have to say, though, the world was really robbed of that show, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. There's nothing more sneaky than a spy in a monster truck.
It's the sneakiest of the vehicles.
Anyway, only 4 writers stayed onto the next season, and then Shankar was brought on board because he had just finished up some TNG work, so he kind of came with that credibility.
Yeah.
And they still had two showrunners, but they got along better. It was Patrick Hapsburg, the guy who stayed in L.A., and then one of the writers, Clifton Campbell, ended up becoming the new showrunners. And as we've seen, they really tried to shift the series to be more grounded, to be a, quote, more hard-edged show.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, an example being the new Captain Hudson coming in, being a bit more of a military man.
Mm-hmm.
And they were trying to do some new stuff, like the idea of killing off Lieutenant Brody was part of it. They wanted to like add an element of danger. They wanted to get the idea that anyone could die, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And they tried to bring the characters into it more. So there's a little more work to develop the characters who are on the show, which we've already noticed even just in the two episodes we watched. The characters seem a little more drawn out. I wanted to bring up a couple things here for your two least favorite characters. They did try to like bring a little more to those roles, and I read some things that we haven't watched, but I thought you would enjoy. Dagwood in this season, apparently he's torn between his friends on seaQuest and the plight of his people, because he's a second-class genetically engineered life form.
Yeah, we've got none of that.
Yeah, and apparently they're like second-class citizens on this world. So I guess there's some episodes where he's dealing with that. Apparently the pejorative for his kind are daggers.
Oh, let's call each other that.
Daggers? Well, here's the thing: is the pejorative is daggers, but they're genetically engineered life forms, so they're also referred to as gelfs.
Okay, what's more
But
insulting?
that's not the pejorative.
What's more insulting though? A Delph, or is that what you said?
Gelf, genetically engineered life form.
Oh, I kind of like Gelf.
I mean, gelf just sounds like how you sexualize them.
Yeah, that old marble-headed cheese man's a real Gelf.
And then with Piccolo, they sort of tried to elevate his character. He became the one that Hudson sort of takes under his wing, Captain Hudson, really trying to like educate him on the ways of the military. And he tried to help him out. He bought a lot of books, which we see in one of these episodes that he gets a book for Piccolo. But apparently this is a running thing where he's trying to like educate Piccolo, give Piccolo like more of a classical education, because as we know, he's dyslexic. And Jordan, I'm sure you noticed this in this episode as well. And I was like, what a weird choice. But apparently Hudson also cured his dyslexia by giving him the pink sunglasses we see him wearing.
Is that what that was?
Yeah, apparently those pink sunglasses cure his dyslexia, allowing him to read books.
There you go. But I will say this. Now, I have been real down on Tony, more so than maybe any character we've ever watched. I will say this. I was kind of surprised, especially in the last episode, how much of a massaging of the character could make him such a maybe not likable, but not hateable character. I didn't hate him. Up to this point, I just every time he came on scene, I was like, oh, please let the scene end. I hate him so much. But then it was like he actually had something to do, and he, imagine, could actually be like almost a three-dimensional character.
Yeah, I mean, it just goes to show the work that went into season 3 to kind of right the ship. I mean, as we know, though, too little, too late, and ratings never recovered, and it was canceled mid-season, and that's what we're getting to, the episode 13, which I don't think ever aired. I think it was canceled after 12 aired, but 13 had been produced. So we're right at the end, and this is the last hurrah for the retooled seaQuest.
Yeah, a bit of a shame. I really do say. I think if this was what the show had been from the beginning, maybe it wouldn't have caught an audience, and maybe it wouldn't have been a big hit, but I think it would be maybe remembered a little bit more fondly.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's the big question. It's like it's really shifted away from its kind of like science-y underwater adventure to more of a military show, but it is the most coherent it's ever been. Yeah,
and I would say this. I think we kind of joked about the idea of it just being under the water, but it didn't seem like such an anomaly, such an odd setting anymore. It was just like, oh yeah, it's under the water, as opposed to like, we're under the water. Oh, what do we do now? That's what it felt like in the first season. And the second season, it was like, I don't know, aliens. You know?
I know. I hear you. But before we get into it, Jordan, do you have a little game you want to play?
I do. It's something we've done before. I think it's interesting to see people's careers. We're going to do a little bit of Guess That Role.
Yay.
And how this works is I'm going to give you a bunch of actors, and I'm going to give a bunch of random roles, and you're going to see if you can tell just based on either, I guess, the look of the person, or the acting ability of the person, or the age of the person, or whatever it may be. You are going to use your Sherlock Holmes abilities to navigate through this.
I'm going to base it on the look of the person if it's my choice.
It's just the look of the person. So obviously we have 3 seasons of people that we have to, of actors that we need to go through. So I've picked a few of them. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 people.
Great.
So with the people we have, options are, we have Roy Scheider, we have Michael Ironside, we have Don Franklin, Jonathan Brandis, Elise Neal, Kathy Evison, Ted Raimi, and Michael DeLuise. Those are our people.
No other DeLuise kid? Just one DeLuise?
I just picked one DeLuise.
Fair enough.
Okay, well, let's get into it. The first rule, do you want me to give you all of them, or do you want to do one at a time? Why don't I give you all the rules?
Yeah, give me them all.
Okay. This person played TJ in 13 episodes of the 2004 to 2007 show Gilmore Girls. This person played the role of Hoffman in the first 3 Spider-Man movies, the Tobey Maguire ones, that came out from 2002 to 2007.
Who could it be?
I know. I've given you a couple to try to make it easier. This person played Frank Castle Sr. in 2004 as the Punisher, Punisher's dad. This person played Penny Ryan in the 2000 TV movie of Murder, She Wrote, called Murder, She Wrote, A Story to Die For. This person played the voice role of Sam Fisher in the Splinter Cell video games. This person did the voice in multiple games. Next, we have an actor who played Haley in 1997's Scream 2. Next to, we have someone who played the young Bill Denborough in the 1990 TV miniseries It, the first version of Stephen King's It. And finally, this person played Noah Dixon in 43 episodes of the 1989 to 1992 show, The Young Riders.
Young Riders. I wonder what that was about. Motorcycles or horses, do you think?
Horses.
Yeah,
it's one or the other.
Let's see what I can do here. Quick question. Michael DeLuise, is he Piccolo or is he the other one?
Oh, Michael DeLuise is... Michael DeLuise is the Tony.
Tony Piccolo, great. Well, Jordan, I feel relatively confident in my
Good.
choices here. But one of them I feel very unconfident, which tells me I've messed up somewhere.
Okay. Well, why don't I read the roles and you tell me if you think you got the person. So who do you think played TJ in Gilmore Girls?
I put down Michael DeLuise for that one.
Okay. Next, who do you think played the role of Hoffman in the 3 Spider-Man movies?
Well, that's Ted Raimi, of course.
Okay. Who was Frank Castle Sr. in The Punisher?
I'm thinking Michael Ironside.
Okay. Who do you think played Penny Ryan in the Murder, She Wrote TV movie, A Story to Die For?
Kathy Emerson? Who was she on the show?
Kathy Everson is Lonnie Henderson, Helmsworth Lonnie Henderson, the one who has the love affair with Commander Ford.
And she shows off those great pipes she has, those guns.
That's right.
In those sleeveless shirts.
That's right. Who do you think played the voice of Sam Fisher in the Splinter Cell video games?
I think it was... I don't remember the actor's name. He's Commander Ford, Don...
Don Franklin?
Don Franklin. That's my guess. Don Franklin.
Who do you think was in Scream 2 playing the role of Haley?
Elise Neal, I believe her name is.
Okay. And we got 2 more. Someone was the young Bill Denborough in the TV miniseries It in 1990.
Well, I do remember that as Jonathan Brandis.
Okay. And the final role, we've got this person was Noah Dixon in 43 episodes of The Young Riders, the riding horses.
Here's the thing. That only leaves Roy Schneider. So I put Roy Schneider in Young Riders, but it doesn't seem like he'd be a young rider.
Well, I'll tell you, you got 4 right, and you had one that you didn't get right, and I think if you got it, it would have really helped you. So you were right with Michael DeLuise. He played TJ in Gilmore Girls.
Okay.
It was Ted Raimi in the Spider-Man movies, of course. That was a little bit of a gimme. It was actually Roy Scheider played in The Punisher. He was Frank Castle Sr. Yeah, apparently.
I assumed he'd be dead by then.
No, he was still around. You were correct again about Kathy Everson. She was in the Murder, She Wrote TV movie. Michael Ironside actually did the voice of Sam Fisher in multiple games. I think he's been replaced since, but he did about, 3 or 4 of those games. Real gravelly voice. You were correct on both Haley in Scream 2 and, of course, Jonathan Brandis in the miniseries It. So you got both those. Elise Neal was in Scream. And unfortunately, you were also wrong it was Don Franklin, who was in 43 episodes of The Young Riders. He was like a sexy young thing, you know?
So I got 5, not 4.
1, 2, 3, 4. You were correct. You got 5. Excuse me. Yes, you got 5 at 8. Pretty good. Sorry, my counting.
Here's a quick question for you.
Yeah.
Not off topic, but somewhat off topic. If Jonathan Brandis is young Bill Denebrough or whatever in It, who was the old one? Was it which sitcom star was the old version of him?
Oh, you know what's funny? I'll look it up. I have a feeling it's what's his face from Three's Company. Wasn't he in that?
He is, but there's also a few sitcom stars who I'm imagining could have been Bill Denebrough's, but I can't remember who would have aged up from whoever aged up from Jonathan Brandis was being very flattered either way.
You're saying if he played a young version of yourself, it's a nice compliment.
Yeah. They'd be lucky to be a young Jonathan Brandis.
Well, it was Richard Thomas.
Who's Richard Thomas?
You know Richard Thomas because he was John Boy in the Waltons, and he was in that movie where.
I certainly don't know him as
Okay,
John
hold
Boy
on.
in the Waltons.
Okay, one. Come on, we all watch the Waltons. Secondly,
how old are you?
Remember that TV movie we watched where the guy found out all his family were aliens and his wife's new husband was an alien and they had a diner? And I think what's his face was
you're saying the Invaders? You're talking about the
Invaders. Yeah. He was the husband in the Invaders. You'd recognize him if you saw him. John Boy.
I would not. I have no idea who this person is. I thought it would be, one of the sitcom guys.
Well, yeah, he was in Anyways, it doesn't matter. It's Richard Thomas. You know who he is.
I don't know who he is.
It's not Harry Anderson. It's not John Ritter. It's not Tim Curry.
Those are the only ones I know.
Right, okay.
All right, let's move on. It's time to get into this episode.
Okay, let's do it.
Here's the IMDb summary for Season 3, Episode 10, Second Chance. A reactor accident sends seaQuest back in time to an alternate 1962 where Cuban Missile Crisis turned to nuclear war. The only chance to put things right again is to travel further back in time and prevent the first shot from being fired. Mm-hmm. And as the episode begins, Jordan, you'll never guess, it's Tony Piccolo's birthday.
Yeah. Hey, let me say something right off the bat. How do you like time travel episodes? You like them?
I like Tony Piccolo's birthday better.
Do you? You like Tony Piccolo's better? His birthday specifically better than time travel.
Very excited to find out his birthday, October 28th. Congratulations. Happy birthday, Tony Piccolo. I hope you have a nice one.
Yeah, I'll say, again, he's much, much less annoying in this episode, so I was like, oh, he's not the worst character I've ever seen.
Anyway, to your question, I always enjoy a time travel episode. Sometimes they're bad, sometimes they're good, but it's always fun, especially I think this late in a show's run to have some characters hop back in time. It's just an easy way to have a fun outing.
I think so, too. And I think they mostly succeed in this, because I think it is a thing. It's a win. It's people just like seeing a fish out of water story. The characters have to get in clothing and stuff. And I kind of wish they had leaned a little bit more into that. I think it would have added a fun element to the characters, but I think it's mostly successful.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little perfunctory overall. Like they just hit the beats you expect them to, but whatever. It's not the best. It's not the worst version.
I would agree.
But other than Tony Piccolo's birthday, seaQuest has also been having some reactor issues. They've had to replace a part, and when they turn the reactor back on, it causes a discontinuity to occur, and a black hole forms in the reactor. But when they try to shut it down, or as they say, quote, scram it, it's too late.
Originally, that was going to be my what's real. I just had scram it written because I love that. That's the best thing I've heard since Bart Simpson told Milhouse to slag off. Scram it. But yeah, so there's a space-time discontinuity. Whoa. And I thought the special effects were kind of funny. You get a lot of shots of like seaQuest, and there's like, it almost looks like cartoon like lightning bolts and stuff shooting out of it. But the whole point is, a black hole forms. They're like, we can't stop this. They go through the black hole.
Yeah. It's just a big energy ball forms around seaQuest. It looks like a plasma ball you put your hands on to make your hair stand up. And they're just like, hey, there's a hole in the discontinuity. Let's just drive through it. And they're like, great, let's go.
Yeah, I do like that. They're just like, let's just get into it. And I like that they didn't spend too much time. I didn't need them to explain the black holes too much. They did just enough. I was like, it's fine. We just need a vehicle to get them there. But I like how they got around. I thought it was a pretty funny way of the reason we really need to know that it's Tony's birthday is that he knows major events that happen on his birthday. I think some people know like celebrities that might have been born on their birthday, whatever, but he knows something specific on his birthday because it was the end of the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Well, and he's also a big fan of the 60s, as we see with the gift he gets from Senator Hudson, a book, a biography on Elvis Presley.
Yeah, and I think that was seeded pretty well for the amount of time they had. Again, I think they could have leaned into that better as being like, well, if Tony is an expert on the 60s, they should have had him kind of leading this thing and kind of showing them how to talk and walk, sort of thing. And they don't really want to do it, but I think it worked well enough that as a viewer, you're like, okay, this makes sense why they know all these things.
Yeah. It's shorthand. They do skip the fish out of water period because they just don't have time for it, where he would like teach them how to walk and talk. But it's sort of there. He dresses them up anyway.
Yeah, and as I said, the reason I mentioned the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Bay of Pigs, is that as soon as old Lucas, who now has like an actual role, and I think it works well for his character, he is doing the test to see where they're at. First thing they do is they find a boat playing music, right? They hear like, something's wrong because things seem weird. Their sensors aren't acting properly, and they see a boat on their view screen, and there's what we know as a viewer, like an old 60s song playing.
Yeah. That's it. They pop out of the wormhole that brings them there. Everything's a little off. I don't fully understand. They do this a few times in the episode just to like get through it, but like they're like, our sensors have determined the date is October 28th, 1962. Yeah. And I'm just like, your sensors figured out the date?
Yeah, it is a weird thing you have to just, I guess, roll with, which is, I don't know, it's like it's always just knows what the date is. I don't know how you would do that because time is a bit of a construct. So, but yeah, the point is they're now just after where the nuclear standoff should have finished, except what we're going to find is in this version of the world that they've gone back to, or this other dimension or whatever they say, the nuclear weapons were armed and fired, and the world has been destroyed for all intents and purposes. But now exactly. Lucas goes to quite a bit of a little mental gymnastics to mention that like it's not a different dimension or all these.
I'll explain that to you if you like.
Yeah, so explain that.
Well, their sensors are able to also determine that this is not an alternate reality, that the singularity they went through was unidimensional. So this is their timeline, and if in their timeline the Cuban Missile Crisis results in the destruction of the world, they realize the implication of this is that the seaQuest was involved in resolving the crisis in some way. And the time travel logic here is a bit of a mess because they're just saying it's like we haven't gone to an alternate world where this happened. We're in our timeline, and we're saying that seaQuest now needs to like be involved in the end of the nuclear crisis. Except what's missing is if this is a singular timeline, we don't see how seaQuest would have set off the nuclear war to cause this future. Like, so there's no inciting incident that changes the timeline. The timeline is just wrong for some reason.
Yeah, it's. And they get over it fast, and I think the reason they get over it fast is just this point. There's a weird plot hole there, and they're just like, but that's what it is. We have always stopped this problem, so that's what we have to do, because that's what created our history.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense, though, why the problem existed to start with. But yeah, they just skim past because they're like, we don't have an answer. Time is a straight line.
Yeah, and I know this is maybe forgiving. I saw that, too, and I was like, I'm fine with it. Whatever. I mean, I know it's a little dumb, but like, who cares? Just get into it and enjoy yourself.
Yeah. Well, they go up and they check out that boat that they hear the radio waves coming from, and what they find is there's a Navy intelligence officer named Commander Van Camp who's dying of radiation, and his dead family all around him, just so many dead children. Yeah,
and they all, I should say, all of seaQuest goes in like radiation suits, so they're all kind of protected because the world is entirely radiated. So they go in. It looks like everyone's dead. Just before they're like, oh, everyone's dead, this military guy, I can't remember what you said his name was, Van Camp?
Von Kamp.
He falls out and he's like, I'm not dead. And they're like, get him onto the sick bay.
Yes. And there, as he's dying, he explains that the nuclear war was set off by an unknown U.S. sub that left its assigned patrol and torpedoed a Soviet freighter that hadn't crossed the U.S. blockade of Cuba yet. This attack, this unwarranted attack, set off the nuclear war. And when he, in a classic form for one of these time travel episodes, when the dying man looks up and sees marble-faced Dagwood walking by, he freaks out and realizes they're from the future, and he begs them to go back and stop the war.
Yeah. And I like, and I don't know how much detail we need to get into this, but they're going to like recreate the black hole so they can do that. So they go further back into the past to try to do what this guy's asking, which is to try to prevent this nuclear disaster. But I don't know. They decide. Do they decide exactly the time, or do they it's just the best they can do? Because they end up going 2 days previous.
No, they are like, we can easily recreate the singularity. They do some math and figure out if they shoot a torpedo into the energy sphere, like 2 degrees to the left, the portal will just take them back 2 extra days. So they do the math on this. By the end of this episode, seaQuest has unlocked the power of time travel and how to control it with like a great degree of certainty. I'm sure it never comes back up, but like the implications of this episode are quite something.
Well, they actually call it later on. One of the characters we meet, the Brittany Murphy character, she's like, "You guys can time travel," and they're just like, "Hmm." I was like, "No, you can. You apparently can. You can. It's not a problem for you guys." But I do like though, the going back 2 days assumes that they know that that's when the problem was 2 days before. What if the problem was a week before or a month before? They don't know. Why wouldn't you want to go as far back as possible and then get a lay of the land?
They know the sub went out of alignment like on the day of the nuclear crisis, so they know what day it's happening.
I'm just saying, give yourself a little bit of a buffer.
You just want a little extra time to get ready.
Yeah, get a little extra time. Go listen to maybe go see an Elvis Presley concert
for his birthday.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Jordan, they don't need to go that far back because the plan is simple. Stop the rogue U.S. sub. To do that, they just need to get the sub patrol assignments from the Florida Navy base. So Commander Ford is going to put together a team to go to shore. He's got himself. He's got Lieutenant Henderson. He's got Lucas. And he's got Piccolo, Master of the 60s.
Yeah,
they're ready to go. So the dream teams come together.
Yeah. And we find out real quickly that Tony stole the keys from the dying guy for reasons, or off a dead body.
Yes. He stole the keys to the boat from one of the dead bodies, had them deradiated, whatever you do, decontaminated. And he's just like, stole these keys in case we need them.
And they're like, "You're a grave robber." And they're like, "But a good grave robber." And he's like, "Thanks, man."
So they're able to go to shore. They're able to raid the Van Camp's boat and steal the keys, and they're ready to go. Although I do have a question for you, just a little side note, just mentioning these keys and like dead bodies. They brought obviously the dying man back to seaQuest to treat him, but they also brought all the family's bodies. What did seaQuest do with all those bodies? Did they bring them with them?
Yeah, that's a good question. Maybe they just shot them out.
I was just like, is this weird that you've now time traveled and brought like dead bodies back in time? Is this a problem? I mean, apparently not, because you can't alter the timeline, or can you? I don't really understand this time travel.
Here's what they probably did. They opened another black hole, shot a missile a couple of inches to the right, and then when it opened, they just shot the bodies into that and go,
just torpedo them out.
Torpedo them out into another time.
Anyway, as the team is raiding the Van Camp boat for clothes, the Van Camp daughter, Christine, drops by, as you mentioned, played by Brittany Murphy. Big surprise cameo.
Mm-hmm.
Which is funny because you had mentioned an actress a few episodes ago. I think you said her name was Brittany Snow.
Yes.
And I thought this is who you meant. I thought you meant Brittany Murphy. And then you explained it. I'm like, oh, it's not Brittany Murphy. So I was shocked to see Brittany Murphy appear then later. I was like, oh, here's Brittany Murphy, the one I thought Jordan was talking about.
Yeah, and she's going to become like kind of the... Again, you're saying they don't really lean so much into what you think they're going to do, which is the fish out of the water thing. But she's going to be sort of the person who's going to take them through all the hurdles they need to do in the 1960s. And at the same time be like, things are different then, am I right?
Yeah. She would have been the tour guide in a more typical episode.
Yes.
This is like a longer feature film version.
But doesn't it feel like they're really racing against time? Like, I know they actually are in terms of the episode of what they need to do, but this is like, they're like, no time for anything. There's no time for fun. And I was like, guys, take a breath.
Yeah, there's too much plot to get through, that's for sure. It does feel like they're racing. I mean, she catches them. They have no plan. They just pull out their guns on her, and they're like, sorry, babe, we're going to have to kidnap you because we're from the future. Like, they just announced they're from the future, and she's just like, I think you're probably Soviet spies. And they're like, no, we're from the future. And they're like, she's like, I don't think so. So it's a great scene because Lucas comes over and tries to calm her down. He's like, listen, we just have to kidnap you for a little while. It's just till we can complete our mission. And then she kicks him in the nuts. And I was like, pretty good.
And yeah, and that's going to be a beat that we're going to get a few times over, which is them being explicitly honest with her, being like, we're from the future. We're trying to stop this impending disaster. And she's
Check
just
out
like,
our laser guns we're holding on you.
Yeah. And she's just like, I think you're Russian spies. And this goes on a few times. I mean, there's going to be a weird thing of like, back then there was racism, not like now.
Well, let's talk about that now. Because, like, they're driving to the sub base, the Navy base, and they've got her like with them in this convertible she's driving. As they're driving by, like a car full of burly teens drives by, and Christine gives them a little wave, and they're kind of like checking her out, and they're eyeing up the car full of people. I did not expect seaQuest to just want to deal with the concept of like the 60s and racism. I just thought they might gloss over it just because it was a lot to deal with. But when they pull over to break into the Navy base, these teen boys pull up in their car. They've been following them the whole time. And when the teen boys get out, they pull out bats, and it's quite clear they're intent on committing a hate crime. A very bad hate crime.
Yeah, it's a whites only beach, and Commander
here's
Ford.
the thing, Jordan. It's kind of wild that Christine's plan was to cause a hate crime to happen in the effort to escape. Like, it becomes clear, it's just like, I did this to make a hate crime happen so I could escape.
Well, yeah, it's funny because I don't even know when this happened. She was just like, when these like kind of hoodlums show up and with baseball bats, you think they're just like hateful people. But not that they're not hateful people, but they're there because she told them to be there. She was like, oh, I wanted them to come, not to kill you, just to like beat you up a little bit. And I was like, but when did she even have time to do that?
She did. She waved at them when they went by. Like, she was trying to draw attention to what was happening.
But was
in the car.
that's what she was signaling to them? Beat them up a little bit?
She was like, look at me, I'm a young white teenager with a black man driving a car. Like, she was like she was making it clear to them that something like not odd was happening, but she was like trying to attract their hatred.
Right, which works. I like though that it's settled with like them being like, well, here we go, and then everyone is the seaQuest team just pulls out their like laser guns and just shoots them all. I was like, great.
Well, what I liked is what we see is like all these white teens coming to them after Commander Ford with a baseball bat, and Commander Ford then has to explain to his white colleagues what racism is because they're like, we don't remember, and he's just like, oh, I remember. Thanks for blocking that out, everybody. Like, it's just like all the white people are like, racism, never heard of it. And Commander Ford's like, I'm going to die in a second.
Well, that's the thing. Even if it was like, it's such a funny thing is even if we're going to believe in 2032, we are a better world where people aren't being racist or aren't being hateful. I think it's a little bit of a short window to get to that point. But even if somehow we got there, it's not as if like 10 years or 20 years or even 30, 40, 50 years, you wouldn't have looked back and said, oh, I know what was happening. Like, it's such a silly thing of them being like, everything's fine now.
I mean, it's a bit of unintentional social commentary that's very funny where, like, the only black team members is like, yeah, listen, people hate my race back then. And people was like, I never heard of that before. I don't think that's true.
Yeah. On a lesser note, when Brittany Murphy's character tests them to see if they're Russian spies, and she asks who won the World Series, and he says it was the Paris Lasers, which I also like. Not only is racism gone in 2032, but apparently Paris, France has a baseball team.
Yeah, I know. I also thought that was funny. The Paris Lasers are winning the World Series.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll move past this. It's just a very strange, interestingly weird scene.
Well, and what we can say, though, you almost want to commend them for doing something. I thought the same thing. They're going to kind of gloss over the uncomfortable things, right? But they don't. But then it's like they also don't spend any time with it. So I don't know what's worse, like just not mentioning it or mentioning it in a kind of really weird and sloppy way. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like, I don't know. It's like, I guess good that they took the 30 seconds for this weird scene.
I mean, yeah, I think it's more interesting that they acknowledged it, though it is just mostly used as like it's just a plot conflict to like pause the action temporarily.
Yes. Yeah. It's done with a very weird tone. So I was like, I don't know how I feel about this, but anyways, as we are.
I mean, it definitely raises questions. It's just like, obviously Brittany Murphy's afraid she's been kidnapped, but her solution is to cause a hate crime to happen. I'm like, well, this is a weird way to feel about this character now. Mm-hmm. Anyway, they laser gun all the racists. They run off, and they're immediately arrested by the military police and Christine's dad, Commander Von Kamp. So, like, they go from that to immediately being arrested.
Yeah, and they're arrested because they think they are Soviet agents or Soviet spies.
Yeah, and they're just like, no, their interrogation with Von Kamp, they're like, we're from the future. We're from the future. Why don't you listen to us? We're from the future. They don't make any effort not to hide it.
This and this is maybe not a fair comparison. This reminded me a little bit of that Deep Space Nine episode where Quark and the rest of the Ferengi are back in the World War II military base. obviously,
Yeah, well, it's not World War II. It's when they become Roswell, when they like are
That's
the
right.
aliens on Roswell.
That's right.
But yes,
Excuse me.
It did feel a lot like that. I do agree.
Yeah, it is, and it's not too far off in terms of the time period. It's a few years different. That was obviously a little bit of a better episode, held with a little bit of a more deft hand.
I mean,
but
that was a comedy, and this is like a thriller. That's the difference.
Yes, and I think that's a good point, though. I think maybe I would have liked this a little bit more, and I can say I like this episode, but I think it could have been better if there was a few comedic moments to sort of break up this like action story that's not really that much action as much as like hitting beats so we can get to the end.
Yeah, it's very forward momentum heavy. That's what's the problem. There's no time to have any fun, really. But, Commander Van Camp's not buying that they're from the future, because why would he? And Commander Ford tries to convince him by telling him, he's like, in the future, we found your son dead, wearing his St. Christopher's medal, like, irradiated beyond belief. And he's just like, my son doesn't have a St. Christopher's medal. Joke's on you. And then he walks out of the interrogation room. The phone rings. He picks it up. He's like, it's his wife. He's like, hello, wife. And she's like, hello, husband. Guess what I just did? 10 minutes ago, I just bought our son a St. Christopher's medal. And he's just like, what?
Yeah. And I like that. It would have been funnier, though, if he was like, well, I know that your son has a mole right beside his genitals. And he'd be like, he does have a mole right beside his genitals. You must be for the future. But they picked a much grosser.
You think that would be funny?
Yeah, that'd be funnier. They picked a less grosser way of doing it. But again, everything is just in the service of doing this fast. So it's like, well, we have the beat of them captured. Now we need the beat of them having a reason to convince him. Now another beat of him being convinced. Boom, he's convinced. I like, though, that like he's almost there and they're like, well, what if you go take this gun and shoot it?
Well, there's the thing is, there's the beat of his wife calls, I just bought my son a St. Christopher's medal, which is insane. Like, to go from walk out of the room and get that call.
It's worth a phone call.
And then he goes and he pulls the keys that Piccolo had out, the keys to his boat, and he turns to his daughter Christine and says, where are your keys? And she's like, right here. And they have two identical sets of keys. He's like, oh my God, maybe they're not lying. And then he goes out with their laser gun to the firing range, sets the laser gun to red setting, which I guess is full power, and then he explodes the entire firing range. It's just the entire fire range is a ball of fire.
Yeah, and they sort of do a homage is not the right word, but in his sunglasses, you can see they do the effect as like a mushroom cloud, sort of reflecting what is going to be happening. I think it's supposed to be showing him realizing that they are here to stop this nuclear disaster.
I mean, plus it's a nice shot because the destruction's happening in his sunglasses. You don't have to see like the middling CG explosion they would have had to do. Like, they're able to like kind of cover it up by doing it in sunglasses.
It's a win-win for everyone.
But basically, he's convinced now. Guess what? Yeah. He believes that they're from the future.
Yeah, and this is the part where like,
well, we finally get back to seaQuest a little bit.
Yeah, and it's funny because how much of this episode is not on seaQuest. I was actually a little surprised that they didn't have the character of Hudson, who maybe is not technically the main character anymore, but he's, I guess, the lead of the show in some ways. He's really relegated to like just being on the ship as all this stuff happening, and then the last third of the episode, they're like, all right, it's time for seaQuest action.
Yeah. Well, they go back to seaQuest finally, and they've been having some trouble of their own. They've been waiting around for this sub-patrol assignment to come back, and while they've been doing it, a Soviet freighter has been getting awfully close to the blockade, so they take it upon themselves to laser off its propellers to keep it in place.
Yeah, I mean, sure.
But that explosion from their laser ends up attracting a U.S. sub away from its patrol sector to check out what happened. And I guess what they're saying here is this is what set off the original thing that nuked the world. The seaQuest had been there, and it caused a sub to leave its patrol because it shot the propellers of this thing. And so this U.S. sub has sort of come into play, and the U.S. sub sees the freighter. It immediately fires some torpedoes at it, and seaQuest has to intervene and like shoot some intercept missiles to destroy the torpedoes, which causes the U.S. sub to notice seaQuest is there and fire a nuclear weapon at seaQuest, which I guess they say they're able to destroy it before the nuclear warhead armed. But basically now they're in like this three-way stalemate. I guess the Soviet freighter has no idea either of them they're there, but now the U.S. sub and seaQuest are in a bit of a stalemate. Which brings us back to shore, where Von Kamp has decided to help Commander Ford and team. So he breaks them loose of the interrogation room, gives them back their guns, and then they like storm the Navy base together in like an armed conflict with the other officers to raid the authentication codes for all the subs. Like, I was just like, do you really need to like hold everyone at gunpoint?
Well, this is the part of the episode that was a little bit of a mess, because it just was like, they're worried that they were going to run out of time. It's happened. They've run out of time, and now they're like, I don't know. They just like, they raid everything. They were shooting off propellers. It's like, I was like, oh, okay, sure.
Yeah. And they get the authentication codes, send them back down to seaQuest, and seaQuest tells this U.S. sub to stand down with the authentication codes. But the sub is a little confused because it recognizes the codes, but it doesn't recognize seaQuest as an American type of sub. So a little worried, the captain of this U.S. sub fires a, quote, war warning buoy. And it's a little buoy that's going to float to the surface, and when it gets there, it's going to transmit a signal that tells the like Pentagon to go to DEFCON 1 and basically launch nuclear war.
Mm-hmm.
seaQuest is unable to shoot the buoy down with a torpedo because it's too close to the Soviet sub, which is, just some hand waving of just like, we need a different solution here. And as usual on seaQuest, Dagwood happens to be walking by in the background, and he's we've seen this so often. He's just walking by. He's just like, why don't you send Darwin to do it? And they're like, great idea.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll give them this. They have seeded that noise under the water. I said that like noise, the Admiral Noise. Noise under the water is the issue. So they're like, well, what's quieter than a dolphin? So, and I have to say, we've seen it a bunch of times, but in this actual episode, it's not the worst idea to send this highly intelligent animal out to do this one very specific task. I mean, is it silly they have a dolphin aboard? Absolutely. But if you're going to have a dolphin aboard, this is the one time he'd be useful.
I mean, you need to use him in the episode somehow.
Yeah. I mean, you could tell they don't even want to use him anymore, but they send him out to essentially deactivate this buoy.
Yeah. By breaking the antenna off of it with his mouth.
Yeah, that's right. And they're like, huzzah! Way to go, Darwin.
No, it's great. My favorite thing, he breaks it off. The entire crew of seaQuest is cheering. They've ended World War II. And it's like a big wide shot of the bridge of seaQuest. And in the background of the shot, a woman in a miniskirt uniform, like she's on the original Star Trek, walks across the background and gives Dagwood a kiss on the cheek. Like, just in the background. I was like, what is happening?
I didn't see that.
Yeah. In the background of this cheering scene, this woman just walks across the set and then gives Dagwood a little kiss. And I'm just like, okie dokie.
Maybe there's like mini skirts on the ship.
Well, there are for sure. I just saw one. Anyway, with this all done, suddenly seaQuest reactor starts making another singularity out of nowhere because the episode's over, so they have to get everyone back to the ship. It's just very funny. It's like they know how to turn them on. It didn't seem like they needed to race back home, but for whatever reason, they're just like, we need one more ticking clock. There's a new singularity growing in the reactor just suddenly after we solve the problem.
Well, they got to get home, right?
Yeah. Commander Van Camp drives the seaQuest crew on the shore back to their mini-sub on the beach. Christine and Lucas have a quick make-out session because they're hot teens and they're like, into each other. So before he leaves, they're like, let's quickly make out. And they're like, okie dokie. I love they do it in front of the dad, and the dad's just like, good job, everybody.
It's just funny because they just still need to have him be like, please, this all worked out. But it is weird to have this rando just like make out with your daughter in front of him. And he's like, well done.
Good job, everyone.
Good job, everyone.
And as Lucas leaves, Christine tells him, hey, drop by and visit me in 2032 when you get back. And he's like, okie dokie.
Yeah, that was the weirdest thing. It wasn't, if you can somehow get back to me in some way, maybe you can time travel again or something, come see me again because I got the hots for you. It's like, oh, that's sweet and kind of cute. But it's like, hey, come visit me in the future when I'm going to be old. And I thought, oh, please don't do a scene where he's then going to go visit when he's old. They wouldn't do that and make it the weirdest part of the episode.
Well, I think it's maybe a sign of the times that maybe Titanic was out because it felt like a really it's like Titanic. I'm like, it's not exactly like Titanic. It's quite different, actually.
Yeah, so seaQuest makes the portal. They make it back. They celebrate. They're like, hey, we did a great job. We're back in our time. And then Lucas is like, hey, I got to leave. Some unfinished business. And they're like, yeah, we'll allow it. And then we cut to like clearly an old folks home. It's like a really nice
it's a mansion. It's a mansion. She has a butler. She's so rich.
Well, it's an old person's place anyways. And of course he's gone to visit her. She's an old lady now.
88 years old now.
What I like is he shows up, he's like, hey, it's Lucas. She's like, I don't know who you are. And he's like, remember you spent that one day with that time traveling person who wasn't a Soviet? And she's like, oh yeah. And then what did you think was going to happen to that moment?
Well, they made out like I thought.
They did not make out. They just hugged. But I thought the same thing. I was sure they were going to make out.
I was very disappointed because I really expected it to be Brittany Murphy in old person makeup, and they didn't do it, and I was so sad.
No. But I was gonna do the math on it. Does it make sense?
Yeah, she's 88 years old.
Oh,
I
she's
did the
88
math on
years
it.
old.
That's how I know.
Yeah. Anyway, she old.
Yeah, she's quite old. It's lucky she's even alive, really.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, that would be a very different ending. He shows up and he's like, well, there's her grave.
It's probably why she's so wealthy, just so the audience's question is like, well, she's so wealthy, of course she'd still be alive. She has all the best medicine.
Yeah. Anyways, and that's the episode. It ends on that note.
What an ending.
Yeah, it was pretty hilarious.
Anyway, let's move on to the final episode of seaQuest. Here's the IMDb summary for Season 3, Episode 13, Weapons of War.
I'm here to trade a Chaldai Shio-class subfighter, as well as information on Chaldai military structure, technology, and future plans.
In exchange for what?
Immediate passage out of the free zone into UEO territory. As long as the Chaldai believe I am here, they will stop at nothing to get me and their subfighter back.
They'd go to war with the UEO over a defection.
As seaQuest patrols a free trade zone between the UEO and Macronesia, Lieutenant O'Neill's online romance turns out to be a defector from an elusive Asian power known as the Chaldai. A power that attacks both the UEO and Macronesia with its impressive subfighter capability. In the final adventure, one member of seaQuest's crew will not live to see another day.
Yeah, a couple things. One, that last point of one of the seaQuest members dying in the, I don't know, most anticlimactic way you could ever kill someone, and just like they're dead. But also, the one thing I don't love about this season, and I know they're really trying hard to establish what it is, they spend so much time just talking about these different allegiances and alliances and governments and stuff. I know it's the point of it, but I find it hard to pay attention to these scenes when they're just like, and then this said this about, and then this, and then they want this piece of land. I'm like, all right, guys, just tell me why I'm paying attention.
Yeah, you're always just like, who's going to give me the biggest tax breaks? That's who I'm voting for.
I don't mean that. I just mean in terms of the narrative of a show, it's just like, okay, just tell me who's good and bad. Who am I rooting for?
No shades of gray, please.
No. Well, but it can't all just be shades of like blah.
Anyway, seaQuest is patrolling the 90 East Ridge trade zone that borders on the edges of the two undersea powers around here. The UEO is obviously one of them, but then there's Macronesia and the Chaldai Confederation, I think they're
See,
called.
I've already lost attention.
But that's not what you're here for, because what's really happening is Piccolo's getting the boys together for a poker night.
Yeah, he's getting the boys together for poker night. He asks old Ted Raimi, what's his name? Tim in it, right?
Yeah, Lieutenant Junior Grade Tim O'Neill.
Yeah, he has Tim, and he's like, hey, come join us for poker. And Tim's like, can't, got a hot date. Tony's like, how can you get a hot date? You're a nerd, and we're on seaQuest under the water. And he's like, guess what? I've been on the internets. And he's basically having like a online relationship with a woman that he can't see, but they've been speaking to each other for months. And he's spending a lot of time in his personal time developing this relationship.
Yes. His online girlfriend is named Kimura. She's a girl from a farming colony who speaks 8 languages, has a genius IQ, laughs at all his jokes, listens to all his complaining, and never turns on her camera. Which, you know, a few red flags.
I know. I was like, man, she might seem too perfect for you. And that last part, does not want to see you. And I like we do get to see them have their like conversation, and they're like, you know, I really like you and I want to meet you and I can't wait for this. And he's like, come on, just like show me what you look like. She's like, no, we promised, only the first time we meet. And he's like, come on, but like, you know, I'm away here. We may not happen for a long time. She's like, and he's like, not fishy to me at all.
He doesn't believe in catfishing. He thinks everyone's honest on the internets. On the internets, you can't lie to someone.
Yeah, but while they're having the conversation, they're sort of planning their date.
Yeah, they're going to meet in 2 hours, Jordan. Finally.
Yeah, finally going to do it.
It's his first date in 11 years.
Yeah, so he's ready to go. He's vibrating.
Do you think that it's 11 years including the 10 years he was like vanished from the world, or do you think it's like he doesn't count that time period? It's like 11 years of like living time. That's
funny that you said that. I guess he's not including the 10 times, so he hasn't had a date in 21 years. But it's funny. So they're planning for this date. He's obviously very excited. But just then there's sort of like, and there's an emergency signal that comes through. And so there's like an all hands on deck. He has to go back to the bridge of the ship to go do his job to handle this, whatever this emergency is.
Yeah, a UEO outpost in the region has been attacked and destroyed before its defenses could even activate, and it appears the attack wasn't by a Macronesia, so it only leaves one option, the Chowdai. But they haven't been seen in 15 years since they destroyed the Moi Tin Ye Confederation and sealed off the Andaman Sea.
That was almost as long as it's been since Tim had a date.
It's true. Last time Tim had a date,
they were seen in the area.
UEO did have a report from a Section 7 spy recently that the Chowdai had developed a new stealth technology, so maybe they use that to circumnavigate the defense mechanisms. But when they call the UEO says, well, it might not have been an unprovoked attack. We have been using this outpost to do secret comm surveillance on the Chowdai Empire, and maybe they just strike back after they found out we were spying on them.
Yeah, and it was like, oh, nice, thanks for letting us know. Which it does seem to be Hudson, most of his character of this episode is just like, do I have to deal with this? And they're like, yeah. And then he'd be like, oh, okay. And then later on he'd be like, do I have to deal with this? They're like, yeah. He's like, okay.
Well, UEO has now assigned seaQuest to stay in the region just to guard against any further attacks by the Chowdai. And this means O'Neill's date with Kimura is going to be canceled. So he goes to call her and just tell her, it's like, I'm not going to make it to the farm colony in time. But Kimura, she can't wait. In fact, she's already stolen a sub from the farm and is coming to see him. She just needs him to give her the coordinates to seaQuest, the highly confidential coordinates. Tim, to his credit, he hems and haws. He's not sure if he should tell her that. So she's just like, well, what if I told you my sub's running out of fuel and I can't make it back? Will you tell me the coordinates then?
Yeah, and I like this. So he's basically like, I'm going to do the only thing I can do, which is steal little shuttlecraft, and I'm going to go meet her.
Well, is it technically stealing? He's using his off-duty shuttle pass, and it's technically not a problem if you look at it from a technical aspect.
Yeah, he knows what he's doing is wrong, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but I agree with Tony, because Tony shows up and he's like, "Are you just stealing this?" And he's like, he gives his little like semantic dance, and he's like, "Yeah, it seems like you're stealing, and you're gonna be kicked out of the military, which you've spent your whole life working in." And he's just like, "I got to do it," and then Tony's like, "All right, I'm your bud. I'll come with you."
Yeah. Tony's gonna wingman for him, even if he's going AWOL during a yellow alert. Tony's got his back.
Yeah. And so they go into the water, and this whole thing here is just like, I didn't know if I got the sense that like they know how sketchy this is. Like they must know how sketchy this is.
Yeah, they do know. I mean, seaQuest starts immediately hailing them about like who's on this ship and what is going on, and they're kind of ignoring the hails.
Yeah, but while they're doing it, Tim's just like, we got to keep going, we got to find her, and then a like very, very fast and hard to track ship sort of starts coming towards them.
Yeah, Jordan, it's got the speed of a hypervelocity torpedo.
I mean, that's fast. That's
so fast.
Yeah, that's it's really fast. It's faster than the date. Forget it. I was gonna make a really bad joke.
Okie dokie. It's a subfighter from the Chowdai Empire, and it looks just like a Chig ship from Space Above and Beyond.
It sort of does, doesn't it?
And the pilot of the ship hails seaQuest, and when she appears on the screen, she's wearing a 70s style Battlestar Galactica helmet.
She really is. And it's what I like is that I don't know if it's here, I think it is, or later on, but like the helmet like has like a front flap and it just like comes up and down like a garage door when needed.
Yeah, the visor just goes up and down like a garage door.
Yeah.
And it's a Chowdai defector looking to come to the UEO, a woman named Lieutenant Commander Kimura. Oh no, Tim's been fooled.
Yeah. I mean, Tim, come on now.
You know, if you just told your buddies over poker, they would have warned you about this.
Yeah, he could just be like, so this girl won't ever see me online, but she tells me she's beautiful. They'd be like, Tim, come on, man.
But yes, as I've said, she wants asylum with the UEO, and in exchange for that, she's going to give them info on the Chowdai and give them one of these magical stealth fighter ships they've developed. She kind of explains, like, she's been catfishing O'Neill for months on end, using a VPN so he couldn't figure out where she was calling from. Yeah,
and she's pretty cold about it, huh? She's just like, yeah, I just like, it's not really his fault. I like catfishing the whole time. They're like, how could he possibly know? And she's like, well, he did A, B, C, D, so he just didn't know. So sucks for him, I guess, that he fell in love with me.
Yeah. She's just like, I took all these precautions so he wouldn't be able to figure out who I was. Plus, he's kind of dumb, so it was easy.
Yeah. Yeah, she's not terribly nice about it. I want to say the one thing. When she first arrives on the ship, I just love the effect of, like, she's Darth Vader or something. She's wearing, like, an all-white costume and this white mask, and there's just, like, dry ice smoke all around her. I'm like, why would that be there? Just very atmospheric, I guess, but...
It's really misty on the sequence.
Yes, that's right.
Essentially, she suspects that the UEO outpost that was destroyed, it was probably her squad trying to find her after she defected. This is what she calls a Chow Dai diplomacy, just straight attacks. And seaQuest needs to get her out of the region immediately or they'll be attacked as well. But when they call the UEO and kind of walk through this proposal for this defection, UEO won't approve seaQuest leaving the region. They need seaQuest there to defend it from further Chow Dai attacks, and they'll send basically a transport at some point to come get Kimura.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So the whole really thing has come is that the side she's left is very violent, very the real protagonist. They don't think, they just fire. She has all this stuff, but she knows she's doing something in terms of diplomacy. She's doing something that's very wrong, which is she's defecting to another side. But she's like, I got all this stuff, so, like, it's worth it, but you need to keep me safe. And I do like that Hudson's just like, no, this is terribly dangerous. I don't want her on, nor do I think this is a good idea. And I guess it's the president of the EU, what is they called?
UEO?
The UEO. He's just like, yeah, you'll do it.
What do you think UEO stands for, Jordan?
UEO, Underwater Exploratory Ocean.
United Earth Oceans.
Yep, I was close.
They do some fun scenes here throughout the episode a little bit, but they look at kind of the Chow Dai's advanced technology. Like, these subfighters are, like, lighter and faster than their subs, but less armored as a result, but it's because there's, like, such superior subs. And we find that Kimura has an electronic web attached to her cerebral cortex, which allows her to control her sub with her mind. So they're quite advanced. Apparently UEO had tried to develop the same kind of technology, but it violated too many human rights, so they never did it.
Well, yeah, and she explains later on that, like, I can't remember what the number is, but a number of people have died from this surgery and this connection to the ship. So it's like a very dangerous, very high death rate on this thing. So, but obviously the result is, and they think it's the ends justify the means, is that they have these ships that can fly so quickly and be maneuvered in such ways because they're not flown in a normal way. People do. It's just, like, instinctual. So they're like, oh, big deal. People are pawns. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah, exactly. And while they're kind of, like, waiting around with Kimura, they pick up some things on their sensors that there seems to be some skirmishes happening over the Micronesia border too. They seem to determine that it looks like the Chow Dai is looking over there and maybe attacking a few Micronesian ships and outposts at the same time, trying to find the missing Kimura. And Kimura doesn't just want to sit here and wait to die. So they did a bad job searching her, I guess, when they put her in her cell, because she has this little, like, button on her that she uses to spoof the security camera in her room. So when the guards come to bring her food, she gets the drop on them. She escapes. She beats up poor Lucas in the sub hangar and steals her sub back and takes off.
Yeah, and this all happened really fast, and it did feel like, I don't know if it was from another episode, but it feels like there was a lot of cool things they could have done that this wasn't really about, like her sort of being this, like, super assassin or something. Like, they kind of hint at that, but it's not really what the episode's about. Like, the morality of creating this super pilot that's connected to the ship, they kind of hint at that, but it's not really what the episode's about. It's more about the defection and the danger that is inherently raised from her just being there. That's what this is about. But I do think there was a few other things they could have, maybe there's just not enough time, but maybe a few other things they could have focused on that I thought were kind of cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, because the plot of it basically is, like, seaQuest just has to sit there until they're finally attacked, and then you're like, just have to wait and see if they survive the attack. Like, that's the danger of the episode, and it's not that exciting to wait for an attack.
Yeah. But she's got an all-white suit, so she's got that going for her.
Yeah. She escapes. She gets her sub. They send our ace pilot from seaQuest, J.J. Fredericks, after her. But, Kimura is such a good pilot, and her ship is so fast, she's not able to stop her. And Kimura's only stopped when they bump into a Micronesian ship that happens to be driving by, and that ship EMPs Kimura.
Yeah, that's right.
And we know the Micronesians are the bad guys, and, like, there's a small confrontation where, like, the captain of the ship calls seaQuest, and he's just, like, super impressed to be meeting the Captain Hudson. And as a result, he's kind of like, well, you've got me outgunned and you're a very cool guy, so I'm just going to let you guys go on your way.
I like that, though, the scene. He's like, Hudson, he's like, it's really an honor to meet you. And Hudson's like, it's not an honor to meet you. I was like, geez, man, A little
What's
pleasantry doesn't hurt.
Maybe it's like when you meet a celebrity whose thing is like they're so rude and it's so funny, and he's just like putting on a show for this guy.
Yeah, he's Sean Penn.
What I don't like about the Micronesians, Jordan, is how come we never meet anyone with an Australian accent from Duo Australia? I just was hoping this guy would be Australian.
Well, I have to say, there is a little bit of like the region. There's a little bit of ethnicity happening. I kind of wish that it was more vague about everything. Like, you're right. Like, I wish almost like accents were hard to distinguish in different places because it's the future, and because these country and nation and continent lines have all been drawn in such different ways. Things would have been developing differently over the last few decades, you know, even with accents.
Yeah. I mean, even in this episode, the Chow Dai Empire is quite clearly like all Asian.
Yes,
but a little ill-defined. It's they never lean into it too hard where it gets too uncomfortable. But there's this like weird thing where it's just like there's an evil Asian empire out there. I'm like, okie dokie.
That's what I mean. It's like it's right on that line, and maybe you and I are not the people to be say if we're offended or not. But it would have been interesting if, when we do see the person who's like going like trying to capture, he wasn't clearly Asian, so that there's more ambiguity, and it's not just like evil Asians, you know?
Yeah, I mean, they don't lean into it too hard, but like it definitely is like, as you're watching, you're just like, oh, this is a real tight line you're about to toe.
Yeah.
Anyway, they get Kimura back to the ship. She's a little injured. They end because the EMP knocked out her matrix in her brain of electronic webbing or whatever, which is fine. And it gives us, we finally get a scene where like O'Neill confronts Kimura over her deception, and we don't need to talk about it long, but it's very funny. Like, O'Neill goes in and he's like, I'm hurt that you would lie to me. And she just points out the absurd fantasy she created for him and how it's dumb he couldn't see through it. I'm just like, yeah, fair.
Yeah, it's funny because she's very honest about it, quite cold. And I think there's a pretty good scene from Ted Raimi, which is basically like someone telling you to your face you're stupid, but you can't disagree with it because the evidence is also being presented. And the only conclusion you could draw is, yeah, you're right. That's horrible to admit. And I think he did a good job in that scene because there was a little bit of like, I know you're right, but it also is hurtful to hear this. And especially for someone who I have feelings for still. But it's just like, he has to just kind of like be like pouty and dismissive because what else can you do when you're proven to be dumb?
I did like that Ted Raimi got an episode. I was happy to see him.
Agreed.
For us to watch an episode where it's Ted Raimi based.
Yeah, and he's a good actor. He's pretty good. And it's like, it is one of those funny things you mentioned before, like this season giving some characters a little more time. You go, oh, who would have thought you could actually learn and find these characters interesting if you gave them more than just them to say like, aye, Captain. You know?
It's true. The episode keeps going, though. seaQuest gets a distress call from that same Micronesian ship that just left. The Chow Dai are busy destroying them, so they send out some fighters to try to like help them or you know, get some survivors. And they send out J.J. Fredericks, our ace pilot, and Tony Piccolo to like fly out on some fighters to take on those Chow Dai fighters. Piccolo manages to shoot one down before his ship is like damage, and he has to. I've never seen this before, but they've got little escape pods apparently that shoot out of the subs. He does a fighter escape, but it's underwater.
Yeah.
And then Fredericks also manages to shoot down one of the Chow Dai subs, and she's like, I got one. And then her ship explodes and she's dead.
I know, that's what I mean. It was so bizarre because not that like this character was so well loved or we spent so much time with her. Maybe it would have been different if we had spent the last 13 episodes with her. But she was just like, I got one. Oh no. And she blows up. And it's shot in such a anticlimactic, perfunctory, not cinematic way that it's like they're saying we don't care about this character. And it didn't have any weight to it, which I thought was so weird because it wouldn't have been that, even like a musical cue would have helped, you know?
Yeah, there is no fanfare. And the explosion that wipes her out, it's so quick and perfunctory to the point that I'm just like, well, she's not dead because, like it's not even clear she's died.
Yeah, it's just like, boom, and you're like, oh, okay. And then, like, later it's like, no, she's dead. She died.
Yeah, the end of the episode, we see Hudson, like, entering her room out, and I'm just like, and there's no emotion to that either. He's just, like, throwing her shit in a box.
There's something to be said about the realism of it, and maybe that's what they're going for. That's sort of like, death doesn't have to be glorious, and it doesn't have to be, like you're saying, with fanfare, but this is TV.
Yeah, real sad send-off to poor J.J. Fredericks.
Yeah, we hardly knew her.
seaQuest looks doomed, of course. So Kimura's just like, I'm going to give myself up to them to save you. I'm an honorable person. I told you this would happen, but like, what am I going to do? I'm not going to kill you all over it. And as she's on her way to get her subfighter to go out and meet her Chowdai Confederates, O'Neill sneaks up on her and like knocks her unconscious, and then shoots her sub out on autopilot. And as soon as it kind of like floats out of seaQuest, the other Chowdai ships just exploded immediately and then like fly away. Like their mission's accomplished. They killed the defector, destroyed the ship. They don't have any further questions.
Yeah, and it's because they know that the ship can only fly with her in it, so they don't even need to check because it can't fly without the person. That's the whole part of the autopilot thing is the great little ruse, and I thought that's pretty good.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it works. And then we cut back, and like they're like, "Oh, our sensors say that Kimura's still on the ship. She never got on." And then they show Tim O'Neill swimming around in the dolphin tubes and popping out of a pool, and I was just like, "Why is he in the dolphin tubes? Why was he swimming in there?" He
was the one who created the autopilot, and he had to go into the water to do that. I don't know why though, but he's the one who created the autopilot to have them go.
But why? None of it makes. Why did he? I just didn't understand why he was swam from the sub bay through the tubes, and he like it wasn't even like I was like, oh, is he going to say I had to put Kimura in the water to shield her body signs or something? But she wasn't with him. She left her, I guess, laying on the ground in a tunnel somewhere. I didn't understand what was happening when he popped out of that water.
He had to go in the water tube. That's why.
Anyway, the UEO at the end of the episode grants Kimura citizenship. She's got asylum. She's got citizenship to the UEO. And then she immediately enlists on seaQuest to replace J.J. Fredericks as a regular member of the show.
Yeah, and they're like, we'll give you a uniform, but it doesn't have sleeves. And they're just like, all right, you're a crew member now. And I get what they were thinking. They're like, this one character's not working. We're going to replace it with a different character who has another interesting history and background. Also, there'll be an inbuilt tension because of this previous love story. I get what they did, but it's obviously very unfortunate it's your last episode. And also just everything about the way they did it was so peculiar. And it's just like, it just felt so much like rubbing chalk off a board. We were like, what? Okay.
Yeah, it's very funny. I mean, obviously very funny because it's the final episode. So the actress, what's her name? Elise, I don't remember now. Doesn't matter. The actress playing JJ Fredericks, sad to see the script where your character's suddenly getting killed off, but not so bad when you realize it's also the last episode of the series, it turns out.
Yeah. Can you imagine watching, like, I don't know, whatever your favorite show is, and they just kill one of the major characters, but in the last episode?
I mean, you do that all the time, like in a finale, but it just, like, this isn't the finale. It just, like, happens through the last episode.
Yeah. Anyways, and then we basically get a shot of, like, seaQuest, like, not quite, like, riding off to the sunset, but sort of, like, sailing away from the camera.
Yeah. I mean, it's not nothing magical. They didn't know this was the last episode. It's just kind of the end of an episode.
Yeah, and as you said, what's-his-face was cleaning out the cabin, but it doesn't even matter because it's not like he was even sad. He's just like, well, gotta clean this out.
Yeah, he's like tossing stuff in a box, and Tony Piccolo comes by. He's like, I thought you might be sad, so I thought I'd come help. He's like, no, everything's in the box. There's nothing left to do. Bye. I'm like, what? This is the send-off?
Yeah, that was it.
Anyway, that's it. That's the end of seaQuest. We did it, Jordan. We got to the end of our speed run.
One of the most peculiar shows, not even so much in the concept, but in the amount of retools and cast changes and tone changes and behind-the-scenes friction. Like, how this show did as many episodes as it did is kind of amazing. And the evolution of the show, better or worse, was, I think, more than we've seen in many shows anyways. I don't know if it's the most we've ever seen.
It's been a weird show to watch and, like, tough to keep track of because so much is constantly shifting. This speed run version of it has made it, like, even more crazy because just, like, we're jumping around. Things are shifting on a dime. It's just, like, a wild, wild show to keep track of.
Well, and you said it before we were talking before we started recording, and it's like, it feels like we're doing a pilot every time. And it does. It's like, you need to introduce characters. You need to introduce the kind of what the show is about and what it's going to be like and the tone. It's like, we've just never had to do that before, where it's like sometimes we have, a character change or something, like a partner dies. But this is just like, okay, and now seaQuest does this, and now seaQuest is about fighting aliens. Now seaQuest is about political alliances. It's just like, this show it's wild.
One thing's for sure, as it goes further and further, there's less and less Darwin, to the point that there's no Darwin in the final episode.
I did notice that. And you know what the thing is, though? I think it would have been a hard thing to do, but they should have either like released him or killed him or something, because he has no purpose in this version of the show.
What if in this episode Darwin swam out during the Chowdhury attack and just exploded, and they're like, well, that's it, don't worry about it. Like, they didn't even have any fanfare. They're just like, huh.
No, what they should have done is they should have fooled them by putting Darwin in the ship, and they read that there's a body in it, and they're like, do they just blow it up? They're like, oh, well, it's just Darwin. He doesn't have a soul.
Tim swims to the tube, pops out. He's like, I put Darwin on the show.
And then just as he say it, you just see his body parts float up to the surface.
They cut back to Hudson, and he just shrugs.
Yeah. No, it would be him clearing out his tube of his possessions.
It's a wet cardboard box and a bunch of like floating toys in it.
Yeah, this is a much better show.
All right, Jordan, let's rate the final 2 episodes. What do you want to give Second Chance?
I quite liked it. Again, I don't think it's perfect. I think it could have been a little more fun, but I did like that they got out of seaQuest and everything kind of at least fit in the place it was supposed to. I enjoyed it. I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10.
7 out of 10. Yeah, it is. seaQuest, I feel, works best when it's kind of just like an also ran like cable sci-fi show where it's just like, it's just aping the beats of better shows. But you know what? You know the crew, you know the cast. It's a kind of something you throw on and just like let it happen to you. And this is what it is. It's like it's a perfectly functional time travel episode. Yeah. Doesn't make any sense when you like, just like all seaQuest episodes, the plot makes no sense when you break it down. But like, it feels like an episode of a show. It's a new version of it, but like it's just another crazy adventure they're on. Don't think about it too hard. I'm also gonna go 7.
Yeah. And what did you think about for the second episode? Because I'll say this, I'm gonna give it a 6.5. I didn't like it as much. I don't think it's a bad episode. I just, in comparison to the other episode, I wasn't as interested in this. I felt there was less characters to have spent time with. We spent more time with this new cast member, and I wasn't as interested in the actual plot. But I think it was pretty well done for what it was. It was like, at least it's an interesting way of introducing a new character, I guess. But I don't know. I could have spent a little more time with the characters that we already know.
Fair enough. I mean, you know, it's always hard because we're jumping around, so we're just happen to end up on one where there's a new character. But I think, you know, a part of this is going to be just like how you feel about the kind of sci-fi you like to ingest, because this one is just a very military sci-fi in this episode. That's what, you know, the third season has shifted to. Though we've seen in the third episode there's been like a very sciencey one with microbes, and there's a time travel one that's a little more sciencey. It just, you know, you're going to get a few episodes that are like very militaristic, and this one happens to be one of those episodes. I don't think it, I think like the time travel one, you know, if you break down the plot and like there's all this like stuff about the Chowdhury, like how much does any of this make sense? Who knows? It's like, it's all just being made up on the spur of the moment, to the point that they're like, we're going to kill a character and replace them, and we're going to do it in the same 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Who knows why that is good or bad, but I kind of feel the same way. I'm like, this is such an also ran that like I'm kind of just willing to like let it wash over me and go on the ride. I do think it's a little weaker. I mean, it's hard to say. I think they're both weak, but they're both just like easy to watch in some ways. So I'm just torn. Like, I kind of want to go 6.5, but like then I should probably go 6.5 on the last one too. So I guess I'll just keep it at a 7.
Okay. And I think to your point about just letting it kind of wash over you, and some things don't quite make sense. This third season, for all intents and purposes, is a new show, and it's what the show's first season should have been. This could be like, you would have forgiven this all because you'd be like, hey, by the time they get to third season, they were doing some really interesting sci-fi, military, sort of futuristic episodes. Those first season ones are pretty funny, but it just happens to be that they like burned all their goodwill for 2 years previous.
No, it's very true. I mean, it's hard to say. Like, who knows what would happen if this was the first season, but I do think it probably survives a little longer, or at least gets its best chance if this is season 1, because at least it's cohesive. Like, you know, Maybe it doesn't survive, though. Like, we watched a better version of a military sci-fi show with Space Above and Beyond, and it didn't survive more than one season.
Agreed.
So, maybe there's no appetite for it really in the end of the day, but, like, this is the closest it's been to cohesive anyway.
Yeah.
Jordan, do you want to hear the final rating for seaQuest, our final overall speedrun rating?
Yeah, let's pump it into the old Continuum Drag computer.
I'll type it in. I won't pump it in.
Pump it in. No, what did he say? Scram it? Scram it?
Scram it.
Scram it in.
The final rating, Jordan, is 5.86.
5.86. It's higher than some, not even some, a lot of shows we've seen. Do you think that's a fair representation?
It's really in the sweet spot of shows we watch. Just a real low, middling 5.
Yeah, I mean, but it's look, we didn't take the escape pod. We got through the entire show. It didn't drop below a 5, which a lot of shows do. But yes, I mean, saying something's a 5.5 as opposed to a 4.9 isn't a huge compliment. But I think, I don't know. It's hard to say if it's accurate representation. You almost want to break this down by season, because there's 3 different shows and 3 different seasons.
Well, do you recommend watching this then? Like, is that something you would recommend someone watch?
You know what's funny? From these speed runs we've done, I would recommend someone do it the exact way we did. If you're interested, I'd be like, pick some random episodes from the season and then get a sense of what the show is. Like, I think there are some fun episodes and some interesting ones. I mean, I would personally say, unless you're like a sadist, don't watch the second season. But you liked it, so there's people who can understand and appreciate the sort of hacky corniness of it, and for what it is. But yeah, I would say if you want to do it, pick some fun episodes and watch it. I wouldn't say you're going to have a great time, but if you're interested, do a speed run.
Well, Jordan, if you were to ask me that question, which you didn't, I would say no. I don't think you should watch seaQuest. I just gave 2 episode 7, and I think at the end of us watching all of seaQuest, I hate seaQuest.
Yeah,
That's my final takeaway. Is like, I think I hate this show.
Yeah, I don't hate seaQuest. I feel it's like a stillborn show. I think there was a lot of problems, and I'm not saying the concept was so strong that if it could have worked with different people. I just think there was a lot of problems, some internal, some external, and everything in between. And I just think this thing was destined to fail from the beginning. I don't think it's a bad show. Like, it's not like offensive or like mean-spirited or anything. It's just a kind of forgettable show, which is, I guess, a sin.
Yeah, I don't know. I just didn't walk away with a good taste in my mouth. I think I liked the episodes we watched sometimes. Like, I definitely have given it good ratings. But at the end of the day, I'm just like, when I think back on my experience, I'm just like, I don't think I liked it.
Well, I won't be nostalgic for it. I won't be like, oh, I wish we had watched more.
That's true. But, Jordan, there's always a chance to watch more.
Oh, no, please no.
There's bonus episodes for charity, Jordan. Now that we finished our speed run, maybe in doing that, we've missed one of your favorite episodes, or an episode that you think is so bananas we need to watch it.
One of those demon possession episodes.
The back-to-back double-header demon possessions. There's an opportunity to do that. We've got bonus episodes for charity, and what that is we've got a list of charities on our website as selected by past guests, and if you want to make a donation to a charity, we'll go back, we'll watch an episode of your choosing, whether it be from a seaQuest episode we've missed, another one of the speed runs we've done that we haven't watched an episode, or even an older show where we just took the escape pod and didn't get to watch them all. If there's like an episode somewhere in the mix back there that you're like, it'd be fun to hear a bonus episode about that, you can make a donation to charity, and we'll go back and record a special episode just about that. All for you for that donation. You can get all the details. ContinuumDrag.podbean.com is the website. There's a link on there for bonus episodes for charity that explains all the details, kind of like suggested donations and how to find the charities. And of course, if you have any questions, you can always email us here, continuumdrag@gmail.com, and happy to answer those for you. But that wraps it up for this episode. So if you go to Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, @ContinuumDrag is the handle there, you'll get to see some final clips from seaQuest.
That incredibly cinematic death of that one character?
I don't know. We'll see. I don't know if I've pulled that one. We'll definitely see some time travel, though.
Oh, yeah, okay.
But that's it. This is the end of seaQuest. We're putting it to bed. So, listener, thank you for joining us under the sea. And Jordan, I'll see you next week.
Would you would you say we're telling seaQuest to scram it?
Yeah, man. Scram it.
Scram it.
Do it like Darwin. Scram it. Continuum Drag is recorded in Toronto, Ontario, and Seoul, South Korea. Theme music by James Rick Seidler. Produced by Jordan Delick and Luke Black. Special thanks to Aaron Yunes.